New York Giants fans?
Welcome back, Giant fans. Today, we're going to dig into free agency. Now, the Giants aren't going to have a ton of money to spend this offseason because they have so many players signed to big contracts. Saquon Barkley, Odell Beckham, Eli Manning if he stays. We still got to see how that plays out, and that will have a big effect on the position we're about to talk about, the quarterback position. Now, for the Giants, there are three potential reasons to sign a free agency quarterback. One is to be a long-term starter. I only see one, maybe two quarterbacks in this free agency class that could fulfill that. Two would be to be a stopgap quarterback, a guy that could start for 1 year if Eli were to retire if we didn't draft a quarterback. Or three, somebody to show a rookie quarterback the ropes. Say we draft a Dwayne Haskins and Eli retires, maybe we sign a journeyman to show him the ropes for the first 4, 5, 6 weeks. So those are the three reasons why the Giants would entertain signing a free agent quarterback. Now, before I dig into this year's free agency class, before I go over the financials and whether or not I think the Giants should bring in a quarterback, and if I do, why I think they should, I wanted to go back in history. I wanted to show you guys how rare it is that a free agent quarterback actually works out. Now, the Giants actually had one work out, Kerry Collins, when we got him from the Carolina Panthers. He actually helped us get to a Super Bowl, and I think he made 1 or 2 Pro Bowls as a New York Giant. He was a pretty damn good quarterback, but it is very rare where it happens. As a matter of fact, you could probably count on your 2 hands in the history of football where a big-time free agent quarterback actually worked out, and the Giants actually got him on the cheap because of his alcohol problem when he came over from the Carolina Panthers. But if you look at the last 6, 7 years, there's only one name that stands out that worked out, and that was Peyton Manning. And he was a legend. And they let him go because they brought in Andrew Luck. That's the only reason why that worked out. And, of course, he brought Denver a Super Bowl. But if you look back over the course of the last 7, 8 years, I got the list right here. Tyrod Taylor, last year the Browns paid him $15 million on a 1-year deal. He was the highest paid free agent quarterback last year. He played 3 games. And then Baker Mayfield took over. Of course, I think he got hurt, but he was playing horribly. He had 2 touchdowns in his first 3 games. They paid him $15 million. They paid him $5 million a start. They wasted almost 10% of their cap on a guy that didn't play. Okay, in 2017, same story. Mike Glennon. Mike Glennon got paid 3 years, $45 million. That guy's probably never going to start another game in his life. So that's more money wasted. You go to 2016, it's even worse. Brock Osweiler, 4 years, $72 million. They paid him $18 million a year to be a stiff. So the last 3 years have been horrific. Now, Brian Hoyer was the highest paid in 2015. He's a journeyman quarterback. Didn't make a lot. I think it was 2 years, $11 million. Same thing with Kyle Orton in 2014, Chase Daniel in 2013. So there weren't high-profile free agents in those classes. But generally, it does not work. And all you got to do is look at the Jets. They've been trying to do it for years. Brett Favre didn't work. Neil O'Donnell didn't work. It doesn't work in free agency. Michael Vick didn't work. You usually have to find your quarterback in the draft. Now, I'm not saying it's impossible, and we're going to dig into it right now. When I look at the 2019 free agent quarterback class, I see 5 names that the Giants could potentially sign for the 3 reasons I listed earlier. One is a stopgap quarterback for a year or 2 to be the starter. One is a mentor-type quarterback for if they drafted a Dwayne Haskins in the draft for 5 or 6 games. And one is a long-term solution, a guy that they think could start for 4 or 5 years. But before I jump into the players, there was one possible trade scenario that I wanted to get out of the way, and there's no way in hell I would do it, but it has been talked about in the past. The Baltimore Ravens this year, of course, drafted Lamar Jackson. Flacco started the year. They started 4-5. Jackson came in. They went 6-1 and made the playoffs. Good chance they're going to go with Lamar Jackson as the starter next year, and they will look to trade Joe Flacco. Now, it's possible they cut Flacco, but he carries such a big cap hit, they're probably not going to do that. I think it's like a $16 million cap hit, and he's due to make, I think, $28 million, something crazy like that. And he's not going to retire. He's 34 years old. But there is no way in hell, if I'm the New York Giants, I am trading for Joe Flacco. I wouldn't trade him for nothing. If they gave him to me, I wouldn't take him, simply for the cap hit alone. He makes more than Eli next year, and he's going to get paid an additional $25, I think, the following year. And if you want to cut him the following year, it's an $8 million cap hit. I don't care how clutch he's been in the playoffs. I don't care that he's 3 years younger than Eli Manning. They're the same type of quarterback. He's going to have the same problems Eli has with this whole O-line. He's not mobile. He's going to get hit. And he's worth nowhere near what he gets paid. I'll stick with Eli if it's between Eli or Flacco. So let's get Flacco off the list. The first quarterback I'm going to talk about in the free agency class is Robert Griffin III. Robert Griffin III was drafted in 2012, and he lit the league on fire. He had one of the greatest rookie years in the history of football, but unfortunately for him, he suffered an awful injury, and he relies on his legs. He's the type of quarterback that needs to have mobility to make throws. That is a huge part of his game. We saw that his whole rookie season. He killed my New York Giants, but since that injury, he has not been the same. Since 2013, his record as a starter is 6-19. He's only thrown 22 touchdowns in his last 25 starts. He's just not the same quarterback, and he's not a capable starting quarterback at the NFL level. He's a capable backup who could fill in for a few games if need be. The only possible scenario that makes any sense for me to bring in RG3 would be if we retained Eli Manning and you wanted to bring in a backup that could potentially pressure Eli. That if Eli started off, say, 3-5 and was having a horrible year, you could say, okay, at least this guy has some experience. We could bring in RG3. I'm only bringing in RG3 on like a $1, $2, $3 million deal as a potential backup. He's not a guy that could mentor, and he's not a guy that I see as a stopgap or a long-term solution. So the only way I would bring in an RG3 is a similar scenario to where we brought in a Geno Smith. He's obviously a little more talented than Geno Smith. He has a little more ability, but he's in that same ilk. That is the only way I would bring in an RG3. Next up is Tyrod Taylor. Tyrod Taylor, of course, last year signed a one-year, $15 million contract, which I said earlier, to start to be the mentor to Baker Mayfield, similar to the role that I think he could potentially play for the Giants this year. The problem I have with this is $15 million is way too much money for a guy that's going to start no more than 8 games. I think Cleveland was crazy for that, unless they thought Taylor was going to be the full-year starter, which is possible. And Tyrod Taylor, to me, actually, when he was with the Buffalo Bills, was incredibly underrated. Now, he didn't put up gaudy stats. He didn't throw for 30, 35 touchdowns, but the guy was very efficient. In his 3 years as a starter with Buffalo, he had 51 touchdown passes, only 16 picks. And he was a good dual-threat quarterback. He usually rushed for about 500 yards. He'd get you 4, 5, 6 rushing touchdowns. So he was a quarterback who didn't make a lot of mistakes. He was similar to an Alex Smith. Not quite that good, but with the lack of weapons he had, Tyrod Taylor, to me, was an average starting quarterback at the NFL level. But to me, he's a mentor-type quarterback. I don't view him as even a stopgap quarterback. If I could sign him to a $5, $6 million contract, that might make sense for me. A guy that could potentially teach Dwayne Haskins or teach whoever we draft at the quarterback position if we were to draft one. And he would only make sense if we cut Eli or if Eli retired. Now, I don't see us cutting Eli. It is possible that Eli will retire, though. And in that scenario, I think a guy like Tyrod Taylor could make sense. The next quarterback on my list is actually who I feel is the most realistic scenario. The guy of all these quarterbacks that I could most realistically see the Giants bringing in as either a mentor or as a backup. He is certainly not going to be a long-term answer because he's going to be 36 years old. And to be honest, he's not that good. He has spurts. Fitzmagic, Mr. Ryan Fitzpatrick. This year, he actually played pretty well. He threw 17 touchdowns in 7 games for the Bucs. He came in, he spelled for Jameis Winston. He actually played better for him. Now, I personally think a lot of that could be attributed to Monken, who I think is a tremendous offensive mind who has since moved on to Cleveland. Fitzpatrick only made $3 million last year. If you could get him on a similar deal, $3 to $5 million, I think he fits in 2 scenarios. I think he'd be a good backup to Eli because I think he puts pressure on him. Lillette is not going to put pressure on Eli. If Eli does not play well, you could legitimately say, I'm putting in Fitzpatrick. This guy has some experience. He's had success in this league. And if Eli's not performing, I could put him in. And then the second scenario, I think he works beautifully if Eli were to retire or if we were to cut Eli. Now, again, I don't think we're going to cut Eli. But it is possible Eli retires. If he were to retire, I think Fitzpatrick could actually serve as the perfect mentor because he's played here before. He's played in New York. He played with the Jets for 2 or 3 years. He knows what New York's about. He's a veteran quarterback. He's played all over the NFL. I think he would serve perfectly, actually. Of all these quarterbacks, he would be the best mentor if you drafted a quarterback in this year's draft. And Murray and Haskins, if you were to draft either one of them, they are clearly not ready, in my opinion, to start day 1. So Fitzpatrick would be a good 6 to 8 game starter for these guys to learn under. He'd be a good guy. You could pick his brain. He's been around the league, and he's played in New York. So I think he fits perfectly in that scenario. Next up on the list is Teddy Bridgewater. Teddy Bridgewater, of course, was a first-round pick for the Minnesota Vikings, and he actually played under Pat Shurmur's system, which makes him an enticing option. He knows the offense. He had some success. Now, he didn't put up gaudy numbers. I think he threw 14 touchdowns, 9 picks in 16 games. Before he got hurt that year in 2015 when they made the playoffs, he actually led the Vikings to the playoffs, and then he suffered a really bad injury. He finally came back last year, but he has yet to be a starter. We haven't seen what he's like through a 16-game season, but people are probably going to give him a chance based on his age. He played well for the Jets in preseason. The Saints traded for him, and somebody's probably going to give him a multi-year deal. I think he'll probably get a similar deal to what Mike Glennon got. He's going to be 27 years old. Someone's going to convince themselves, we're going to give this guy a chance, and we think he could be a stopgap starter. It might be the Denver Broncos. It might be the New York Giants. Me as a Giants fan, I don't want that. I'd rather start over. I'd rather draft a quarterback or stick with Eli for 1 more year. Now, if Eli were to retire and we didn't like a quarterback in this draft and Bridgewater was willing to sign a deal similar to what a Tyrod Taylor signed last year, 1 year, $15 million, I might be willing to do that. But this guy, by no means do I want to sign to a multi-year contract. I stay away from the 3-4 year deals from Teddy Bridgewater because I think there's a higher chance he'll be a bust than he will be a success. Now, I won't doubt that he potentially could have a comeback similar to what Kerry Collins did for us. It is possible. But I'm not willing to take that chance. I'd rather take the chance of the draft on a rookie deal. And then finally, the last guy on our list. The guy that if you were to sign this guy, you are going to have to commit as a stopgap quarterback. He's going to be 30 years old. And he's played great as a Philadelphia Eagle. There's no doubt about it. Nick Foles, he has broken out. And, of course, he started with the Eagles, and he played great under Chip Kelly. He had one of the best years ever in terms of QB rating in that Chip Kelly offense. Now, of course, the Chip Kelly offense helps pad the stats. Everybody knows that. But he did play great. And then 2 years later, he went and he got a free agent deal with the Rams. Played horribly there. He threw 7 touchdowns, 10 picks, didn't even finish the season. And then 2 or 3 years later, he found himself back as a backup with the Philadelphia Eagles before getting an opportunity last year. And he led the Eagles to an improbable Super Bowl run after Carson Wentz went down. Wentz, of course, was going to be the MVP. Foles came in, went 2-1 the last 3 games, and then won 3 straight playoff games, winning the Super Bowl. And he played marvelous in the Super Bowl. And it was the same story this year. Wentz goes down. He plays the final 5 games. He goes 4-1 and wins them a playoff game before losing in New Orleans, a game in which they could have won. And he played great again. The guy's been clutch in the playoffs. He's played great the last 2 years as the Eagles, but he scares the hell out of me. He's never proven to be good outside Philadelphia, and part of me thinks he's a system quarterback. And there's a reason that the Eagles aren't keeping this guy. He's still going to be only 30 years old, and I think he could easily be a bust. Now, could he be good? Absolutely. And if he was willing to sign a 2-year contract, I might entertain it. 2 years, $40 million, 2 years, $45, I might take a chance. But that's not going to happen. He's going to want a similar deal to what Osweiler got. Osweiler signed for 4 for 72. I'm expecting something similar, a little more probably 4 for 80, 4 for 85. And I think somebody's going to give it to him. And I hope it's not the New York Giants because I would rather sign a rookie. I would rather get a guy like a Haskins, like whoever, whichever rookie quarterback they like. I'd rather sign them to a 4 or 5 year deal on an average cost of about $9 to $10 million a year, which will be less than half of what Foles is going to get. And you have the guy for the future. Foles is a stopgap quarterback. I want to draft a quarterback. I don't want to make any long-term commitments at the quarterback position in free agency. It's nothing against Foles. Foles might sign with a team and play great. But I'm not willing to take that chance with the New York Giants. I want to start over at the position. I either stick with Eli for 1 more year if I don't like any rookies in this class, or I draft a rookie quarterback this year. I am not spending big bucks in free agency. If I'm bringing in a free agent quarterback, I'm doing it to be a mentor if Eli retires or a backup that could push Eli if Eli does not play well. I'm not making any long-term commitments in free agency at the quarterback position. We've seen the failure rate, and it is high, and I'm not willing to take that chance. As always, guys, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe, drop a comment. Maybe give me a little thumbs up. Tell me what you think. What would you do at the quarterback position pertaining to free agency? As always, cheers.